I know I suggested maybe starting this on Friday during the day. Um, then I got bored and took a nap instead. And then suggested maybe trying this last night, but it was Mother's Day and everyone rightfully had better things to do than to podcast about fantasy football. So good on everybody for making some good decisions in the last week. But the time has come to get into round two and through three and start rehashing some of these draft picks. So we've got the Vikings, the Eagles, and the Giants ready to take you through it. What we're going to try and do is balance both the pick as well as some of the trades that are happening simultaneously. We're going to see how this works. We haven't usually done this format before, but really, I think, and Giants rightly pointed out, one really informs the other. So we'll go ahead and get started here. But the first action of the draft was Giants at 201. So, Brandon, why don't you take us through the pick?
Yeah, so we were kind of talking about this a bit at the end of last pod. Josh Downs was a guy that was on my short list who went the pick before a Seahawks traded into that pick. So it kind of just came down to taking a premium position versus taking just the best player on my board. And I thought Carter was a defensive tackle who could have gone in the first round. So I was pretty okay taking him at 201.
Yeah, I think we all kind of agreed with you there. Maybe hoping they were just going to fall a little bit further, but especially with the potential additional start coming from D tackle in next year's format, pretty good grab.
Yeah, and that was a big factor too, and because like normally I would never have prioritized defensive tackle in the first or even second round, but the fact that the true position changes that we learned about a couple weeks ago was projected out and then made known also definitely helped with that decision. And I think as we're starting to see that like impact a couple of the different draft picks. We saw some linebackers, I think, slide a little bit later than they might have because we were going to go down to just one starter.
Yep. All right, then after that, no, the pick was held up because you were trying to free a roster spot with a trade. In this case, the trade was given up the 506 to the Commanders to take Justin Watson and give you the roster spot. Gets processed shortly after that. Then we've got a couple of picks before we see another trade that really impacts things. Next up is the Patriots taking Trenton Simpson, linebacker from, I think it was Clemson, that went to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Definitely, again, with linebacker scarcity makes some sense, especially since the Ravens have come out and said they are not going to offer a fifth-year option to Patrick Queen, which I imagine has something to do with Simpson being there. But still, it's with a positional scarcity pick, something that hopefully Patriots thinks he's going to keep his points down with while setting himself up for next year.
Yeah, exactly. I think there was there was Campbell, that first tier of linebacker that we all agreed was like a pretty good value pick in the first round. I was surprised that this next tier was all still available at this pick. But I think, like you said, good investment in the long term. He doesn't mind if he's riding the pine for this year behind Queen, since he doesn't want the points anyways.
Yeah, he's not going to do a lot this year. They're going to use him for some things because he's definitely a better coverage linebacker than Queen is. So I could see him later in the year. But also, all it takes is one injury between Roquan and Queen for him to see significant time. So, yeah, good pick for the Pets just for what he wants to do for next year.
Yep. Next up, Bengals trying to, I think, solidify his running back room. Definitely a player that I think some folks liked before the draft. The landing spot, especially with everything going on with Mixon, Chase Brown going to the real life Bengals and our Bengals. If there's any kind of suspension with P. Ryan gone, people are seeing Brown as a direct beneficiary. But again, day 3 running back, I'm not 100% sure the value is going to return, but it's a high risk, high reward situation, if you ask me.
Yeah, I said at the time I was kind of shocked by this pick. If Mixon gets cut, then this looks great. But like, I mean, at least for 1 year. And I know Chris is really just focused on like 1 or 2 year windows for his team. But like, I expect if Mixon's gone, that like either someone else is going to be brought in, or at the very least, they're drafting someone next year who's going to be higher draft capital and expected to be like the bell cow. So I think he wanted, that was like his weakest position, running back, and he took the guy that he thinks probably has the highest upside from these folks. But this is going to be time will tell if this ends up being a huge like swing and a miss, or like is this the next Dameon Pierce?
Well, be fair, there's not a lot of talent in that running back room behind Mixon anyway. So unless they bring someone in this year, he's gonna have some value. And then on top of that, if something does happen to Mixon, even more.
I mean, Evans is still there, and he got spot play with P. Ryan still in the room. And Trevion Williams, I think, has always been an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Granted, his injury at Oklahoma. There's some beat writers who suggest that if there was an injury or something to Mixon, that Trevion would shoulder more of the load. But
and it was the GM or the coach who like kept bringing him up in the in interviews when asked about like who's going to fill in like with the P. Ryan gap, and they were like, we still have Trevion Williams. He's going to fill that role. So I do think they're envisioning him as RB2 right now.
All right, moving along. Saints taking Will McDonald from the Jets. The end, continuing to add talent to his team. McDonald's an interesting one. I think he's going to transition in gradually, since they do have some starters on the line already with Johnson on one side and Lawson on the other. Lawson is very expendable, though. But it may be one of those where they see how McDonald comes in and either slowly bring him in this year, or, hey, if he comes on like a freight train, Lawson is expendable and saves him some cap dollars. So good build pick, especially the way that Salah and the other sort of former 49ers DCs like to build their defense.
Yeah.
On his actual draft call, he was talking to Saleh, and he just goes, "Yeah, we're not going to have you play 5-tech anymore." And it's like, "Yay, finally!" Because if you watch his tape, he looks completely out of position the entire time at Iowa State. Just weird conference defense. So he's going to be transitioning into pro as a lot better. And then also Carl Lawson, it is like the last year essentially of his deal. So there's not much keeping McDonald from getting a bigger role.
Yeah, so it's definitely gonna be a rotation, like Lawson's role regardless. They rotate their pass rushers a lot there, but I thought it was a really good value pick.
All right. So next is the 205, which was me. And I ended up moving off the pick to the Chiefs, giving the 205 and the 319 this year for 213 and Green Bay's second next year. I felt safe moving down with what I saw as a value on the board. And Chiefs took advantage, taking one of the running backs who was in a prime handcuff role in Tank Bigsby, where all the word out of Jacksonville is he's the RB2 there this year. And with ETN being smaller, faster back, there's definitely some potential for Bigsby to see some big volume.
Yeah, this is one of the backs that I might have taken over Chase Brown a couple picks earlier. Chiefs, he loves these like early second round running backs. He's hit on Ramondre, Pierce. He's maybe not necessarily drafted all of them, but acquired them, and Brian Robinson. So this is kind of just like another guy in that arsenal. I know he doesn't have all of them still, but pretty typical like Chiefs pick. And I like the trade for you too from the value add.
Yeah, and then you also have to just there's already been a Liz Frank on ETN, so
Yep.
He fumbled a couple times in the red zone last year too, so it's possible that Bigsby is going to get all the red zone work.
Yeah, he's a little bit bigger, or dual back. They could even use Bigsby as a little bit of a fullback if they work with him on it too.
Very true.
So.
Packers are here at 206. From when they moved down from 132 with the Seahawks. Here taking Luke Schoonmaker, tight end for Dallas. I think folks may be a little surprised that Schoonmaker was the tight end that Dallas ended up with, but nonetheless, definitely a position where there's opportunity to step in from day one. So solid pick here from Packers, taking advantage of the trade down from the Devontae Adams pick.
I'm very skeptical of this one, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm a Cowboys fan. I watch him a lot. Ferguson is dead slow. Watching that man run is painful. He offers essentially nothing to the passing game, essentially. Like, he runs the short routes and whatnot. Hendershot is essentially our new Blake Jarwin. He's our shot tight end, and Shoemaker's like right in the middle, but he still isn't that great of an athlete. He just does everything really well. So I don't really know how we're going to utilize all of them. And the factor that we have all three of them and none of them are really that significantly better than the others, I feel like it was a little early to take that player over the other people on the board, just because I'm not sure he's going to be the tight end in Dallas. When you're spending that kind of pick, you would be hoping you're getting a little bit more.
Right. And my feeling on this too is look at what Dallas is doing. The tight end in Dallas, because of, how they've been performing, has been a valuable piece over the last couple of years. However, they just added Brandon Cooks without necessarily taking the only receiver they really took out of the room is Noah Brown. So in my estimation, they're probably going to run more 3 or 4 wide receiver sets, especially with Pollard on the field, wanting to spread things out to give him some more space in the middle of the field, and go for more of that blocking tight end rather than the receiving tight end, or do 2 tight end sets where one's blocking and one's your Hendershot shot tight end. So seems like a scheme change, which may make tight end a little bit more expendable. And if that's the case, this pick makes a lot more sense to me for the Cowboys, and like you said, a lot less sense for me for the Packers.
Yeah, I think the one thing from his like roster construction standpoint is like he's got a pretty good running back room. He's got some good receiving room here. Kelsey's on a 1-year deal at $20 million right now, and he had no other tight ends on his roster. So I assume this is kind of like a future-proofing move, since either needs to trade Kelsey or get pick 132 when he tags him again next offseason. So I kind of viewed it as like it made sense. It's not the player at the top of my board at the pick, but like I kind of could see like what his like future plans would kind of be with the pick here.
All right, Chiefs come back on the clock here. Take Tank Dell. I forget what podcast I was listening to, but great suggestion. If your nickname's going to be Tank, you can't weigh 165 pounds.
Yep, he's going to be a little small. Kind of a so apparently like Stroud was like, you guys got to draft him because like this is not the type of body that Ballard would typically draft. But he should be playing. Sorry, this is not Ballard. I mixed up Downs and Dell.
Yeah, no, I got
crowded.
you.
Okay, crowded receiver room in Houston. Still with Stroud. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, he seems like one of those guys. If you bring him in, you have a certain like packages you use him in for short down situations, kind of like Cole Beasley early on in his Dallas career, and then you just hope that he builds up to like 180, 183, and then you just develop more onto him. I don't know how much you should expect from him early, and I don't honestly know how great he will ever really be. I have a lot of issues with guys that are just that small.
The
Yeah.
the I'd say silver lining on him, and I agree with your comments, um, is he did everything for Houston. He was deep threat. He was cross the middle. He was screen game. He was return man. He was your do it all kind of guy. And I don't I don't know how to make heads or tails of the Houston receiver room. It's one of those where, hey, I want a piece of it because I don't know who's going to come out and be the number one there. But its opportunity is there. Anyone in that room I could see at 15% or 5% of target share. It's just kind of completely up in the air, if you ask me.
Yeah.
No, it definitely is. It's definitely seems like one of those where they have a bunch of. It's kind of like Carolina, where it's like they have a bunch of guys that are very good at certain things, and you just want to see how their offensive coordinator is going to try to utilize them, whether or not they're going to sub a lot and have guys, do what they're best at, or if they're going to try to stick with a more traditional, these are our best three guys, we'll rock with them kind of thing. So
To take a slightly more macro view, I think this is all kind of the end of a tier of the like wide receiver running back group that was still available.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think it was a good value pick in that sense if he was looking to add like offensive points.
yeah, the first round destroyed all the offensive talent.
Yeah.
It was essentially all gone at that point, which gave a lot of great IDP value with the
Right.
next
No,
several picks.
agree completely. I think this is a lot of the first round IDP value you would normally see be gone at this point. That because of the offensive scarcity, maybe people may have reached a couple positions at the end of the first round because they saw the end of the kind of the cliff coming of some of that offensive talent. Because we really go on a run of all runs for defensive talent here, starting 208. Miles Murphy, love the prospect, just physical beast. The problem that I had with him when I was looking at his tape is all the wins he had were kind of rush to the outside and rush in such a way that not let the tackle get his hands on you or get a good hands on you. And that's great at the college level, but there's going to be pro tackles are going to figure out how to do it. And I didn't really see a lot of depth in Murphy's game beyond that to adjust. Again, the physical prowess is there, and he'll develop a defensive game. But I think he's going to see some maybe early success and then a pause as he starts developing a game he hasn't had to in the past.
Yeah. He's another one that's not going to see like a ton of snaps without an injury this first year, which I think it makes sense for the Lions. And we'll see, who wins out a year from now. If Hendrickson and Hubbard are still there. I'm not sure about their in real life contract situations, but
Yeah. Murphy, to me, I had him as a really highly rated run defender with, all the athleticism and everything to be an upside pass rusher. I think he kind of becomes that Sam Hubbard guy to where, you're getting 8 points a week out of this guy out of nowhere because he's just getting and racking up tackles. And then every once in a while he gets a sack and it's a 16, 17 point game. And you get him in a rotation with Hubbard and Hendrickson. And Osai hasn't done anything essentially since he got there. He took a rookie year redshirt and medical, was banged up some last year too. I think Murphy's a better athlete and a better profile because he's better against the run than my grades I had on Osai. So especially on third down there, a third down in obvious passing situations, they do move Hendricks inside. And I could see Murphy getting those snaps on the outside, trying to bend the edge with his speed with him, Hubbard, and Hendrickson. So I think he's going to have some value early, but I'd be surprised to see him do too much early. But yeah, it's going to be contracts later on with Hendrickson and Hubbard. how effective he'll be.
All right. Followed right on by another D end. Actually, back-to-back D ends. Panthers taking Derek Hall, who went to the Seahawks, and Isaiah Foskey, who went to the Saints. Really, ton of D end talent in this class, both in terms of availability and quality. Panthers are starting to stack up. Hoping some of these guys break out. Like both the players, but it's going to be one of those where I like a lot of the DNs to go here. So I feel like this is a pretty not necessarily even tier. There might be some minor peaks and valleys here, but for the most part, I think a lot of these next couple picks that are edge rushers are going to be good value picks.
Yeah, agreed. And I like the next four that go. I like these two, both talent and spot wise.
All right. And down to the Jets, who go back-to-back DNs.
We had a trade here, Mike.
Oh, you're right. We had the trade happen in between the two. I was trying to keep track of that. So the Jets giving up 220 to get Harold Landry at linebacker here. So he goes back-to-back DN, then grabs Landry, who is a linebacker this year, but should transition to edge next year. But again, continuing to focus on building out that defense using a combination of picks and moving some of these picks for the right players.
Yep,
I think that's good value for Landry.
I agree.
Yeah.
Also processed. Also processed at this time. Justice Hill for the Bears' 5th round pick next year, and the Chiefs giving up 211 to the Jets for 217 and Tampa's 3rd, which again allowed the Jets to move up and get Felix here. So good catch. Apologies for missing that trade. So the trade executes so we can get Felix, and then on the side he also gets Harold Landry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted somebody.
Yeah, no, nice pickups. I mean, I like the defense that you're building a lot, James. It's all pretty much like undercosted, like good value draft pick guys at this point, both linebacker and D end.
No, I had good grades on a lot of these DNs, especially all these guys who went where they did. Derek Hall to me was the guy that I just loved from the get-go, like underappreciated at Auburn, and then he landed at Seattle, where they really needed an edge guy. And then when you have Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, and the entire secondary, you're gonna have extra time to get after the quarterback.
Yeah.
Then Foskey was just a terror at Notre Dame, and the big thing over in Duque and Ojulari for me was I really like Felix. It's just he is essentially their replacement for Frank Clark and the replacement for the guy they had before that, D Ford. And neither of those guys were really fantasy stat fillers. Like they're nice, good players, but it's like either they got a sack that week or they didn't matter.
Yeah.
And BJ, he's a little smaller. He's like 6'2", shorter arms, and it's Arizona where you have no help. I just didn't see an instant impact defensive player.
Yep.
After his landing spot.
Yeah, but it's probably worth like mentioning. So we talked in the first pod how Jets went and like just hit wide receiver a bunch to kind of fill in that gap that he used to get Stroud. It was, I thought, really good value to kind of come back here in the second and still kind of fill out some of those defensive pieces that we thought might need to be taken in the first that clearly fell a bit further than we thought.
Oh yeah, pairing those two with Will Anderson, he also got a 110 is like ridiculous amount of value. Like even if Zuma is just that sack weak guy, you think Will Anderson should be one of the top 12-ish edge guys going forward-ish, maybe top 20 wherever you have him. I honestly think he's going to bulk up and be that guy. I don't think he might not be at his rookie year, but I think he's going to bulk up and be a dude. But having him and then having Nduke and Ojuware going forward, it's great. And then also getting Landry from me. I just had a lot of questions about his productivity and where it actually came from. Like watching the tape, a lot of stunts, a lot of games, not a lot of true pass rush wins. And with Tennessee just, killing itself, getting rid of all of its talent. I originally got him thinking that at the 209, 210, a lot of the edge guys I liked were going to be gone. And then they just kind of all fell because the draft went differently. So
I don't remember how you acquired Landry, but I remember it being a pretty cheap Landry when you got him.
it was cheap when I got him. So I didn't really lose much, if anything, on him. I got Landry in the 215 for Van Jefferson, Khalil Mack in the 323. And I got Khalil Mack for, I freed up like $10-12 million in cap in like the 312. So
Yeah.
All worked out. Saved some cap, got the 215, the 220 essentially.
Not bad. The next trade here, I moved down from 213 to 222 and pick up Khalil Shakir from the Steelers. This is just a mistake on my part. So when I pulled my my draft list of eligible players, it was before MFL made their most recent adjustment of player position, and Sanders was still listed as a D end. So at the time, I still had him as a D end and figured he was part of a much larger tier here instead of having linebacker eligibility. But Steelers makes a great trade up and grabs him at 213. I like some of the linebackers that go, but I think Sanders is a cut above. So great grab by Steelers.
Yeah,
he's a heck of a player.
I really like Sanders. He was actually who I was thinking about back at 201. He was I had like a group of like 3 or 4 players, and Sanders wasn't included there.
I honestly would not be surprised if he took Singleton's job this year. I know Singleton has been a very productive fantasy guy for a couple of years, but he gets in the doghouse pretty often to where all of a sudden you see him subbed out for a series or two and you see him on special teams. He's a good player, but Drew Sanders is a very good talent. So I wouldn't be surprised if he finds himself in a big role early.
Yep. Then Colts comes back and takes another linebacker. Dayan Henley went to the Chargers in the real draft, goes to the Colts in our draft. I like Dayan. I moved him up my board into kind of my second tier. But I felt there were probably 6 or 7 guys in that tier. So if you're taking a linebacker, this is probably one of the ones you'd be choosing between. But this felt high based off of some of the other pieces on the board.
I can agree with that.
I think he's in my opinion, at least like linebacker wise, he was like the last one in maybe this like second or third tier. So if you needed linebacker points and there's a gulf between this and the next linebacker, kind of take it while you can get it.
Disagree slightly. I had 2 others in that tier.
I didn't hate this one that much.
Yep. Then we move back to Panthers at 215 that he just picked up. Takes Kalijah Kancey, defensive tackle for Tampa. And if I do recall, he was one of the couple players in this draft getting comped to Aaron Donald.
Yep. Well, I think he was the only one being comped to Aaron Donald, right? I hope.
Yeah. No, I had some concerns of him myself. I still do. I did really enjoy the factor they landed with Vita Vea, though, for some of my concerns about his ability against the run, especially double teams. But it's also a different front than what we're used to seeing him in. But I think he's got the chance to be really, really nasty in Tampa.
Yeah,
So.
Tampa was a great landing spot for him, I think. It'll be very interesting to see if he can be as productive as people project. To go back to Henley real quick, there was a trade.
Yeah, you're right. I just saw it. Colts got the pick to get the linebacker by giving up Roquan Smith for Jerome Baker, the 214 and 438 with the Bengals. So basically breaks down Roquan for the 438, Baker, and then Deion Henley here. So I think a lot of us have thought that he needed to do some breakdown moves and add some depth to that roster, and that's the kind of move that makes some sense.
And the next trade he did just that. It doesn't impact the second round, but it might be worth mentioning.
Yep. So the following trade, which processed a couple hours later, breaks down DeForest Buckner to the Panthers for Aleem Mitchell, Charles Harris, Peyton Turner, Kingsley Engbare, Darnell Savage, 435, 440, 513, and 537. So adds a bunch of late picks and good, I'll call them defensive rotational players with a good amount of upside, especially Harris and Turner in the positions they're in and where they're drafted if they can return on some of their promise.
Yeah, I kind of like obviously Buckner's the best player in the deal, but I kind of love this trade for him because he needed the depth, and so he got at least one spot at every defensive position, which I think was great. I really like Savage as a safety, fairly underwhelmed by everyone else, but sheer just like best ball depth piece, I think it kind of made sense.
Yeah, he was trying to get a little bit more than this too. He was trying to get more draft picks and whatnot, and I just finally put my foot down. I'm like, I'm really moving all these pieces out of my need for contract years.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have to move all of them, and at the same time, these are all players that are better than what you can get on free agency right now, and you don't have any draft picks. He didn't have any other than the one he had just used. So it's kind of like. Yeah, he had himself in a bad spot, but he got a lot of upside players. I really liked a lot of those guys. It's just, when I looked into the.
And looking at your team, especially knowing you still had some second and third round picks coming up, like they were likely never just like be starter points unless they had a pop off week for you. You weren't really relying on any of them as starting points. So.
Yeah, it's a good consolidation move for Panthers and a good breakdown move for Colts. So really like the deal. Back to the D end run, Tui Puloto. I had a ton of trouble announcing his name when we did our mock draft. Still haven't gotten any better at it, but landed with the Chargers. Which means, again, probably in that 3-4 scheme, but, should be get some good opportunity there with some of the defensive pieces moving around for them.
I know he's on the bigger side weight wise. Is there like a fear he could move inside?
He's 6'3", 290.
Yeah, he's inside outside versatility. He ran well though. He can kind of do a little bit of everything, and he was really good at USC. It'll be interesting. He could easily take like the Morgan Fox role, or he could, just back up Bosa and Mack, because Chris Rumph, the guy they took last year, did nothing.
Yep.
Well, it's nice that Commanders finally addressed his defensive ends.
So then we've got another trade here into the 217. Cowboys giving up, let's see here, their second next year, their fourth next year, and the Colts' fourth next year to move into 217 with the Chiefs. And at the pick, they take Israel Abanikanda. I liked him a lot better pre-draft. I think a lot of the numbers that we were seeing from him from testing were good, but I think the NFL draft told us that they didn't think a whole lot of him. He's now buried in New York, and it's tough to see kind of how he makes it out. It's Brees would have to get injured because I feel he kind of takes the Brees role with Carter keeping the Carter role, but it's going to take that level of injury to a player they spent that much draft capital on last year So I understand taking him here because pre-draft he had the talent to be in that tier, but landing spot kind of buried him, if you ask me.
Yeah, but I don't think he like overpaid to get into 217. I think that pick will be much later, or at least later next year. And the fourths are honestly just dart throws.
Like the player, like the talent, hate the landing spot.
Don't mind the price.
Right.
All right, Dolphins are up back to back. Let me double check to see if there was a
There's
trade.
no trades for until my picks. I don't think that impact this round.
All right, let me just scroll up a little bit here, and I'll kind of zoom over some of the ones that took place here in between that I think definitely are worth covering. But Dolphins going back to back, taking Keon White, D tackle, and Donald Washington at tight end. Sure, why not for these picks? I think there's better options out there at positions that Dolphins needed more. But if you're looking for potential, physical freaks at their given positions, these are okay picks to make. But I think based off of what was still on the board and where really Dolphins needed to focus, there are better things to be picking here.
I mean, RJ, you might know better, but I'm pretty sure White might be a defensive end.
Who? Keon White?
Yeah.
He's a defensive end.
So yeah, he might get a position switch, which will make this much more attractive.
Yep.
Because I know they're talking about how he's going to be in a rotation with Uche and yada yada yada.
Yeah, the expectation is he's a little bit more consistent than the inconsistencies they have on the outside.
All right, and then I do hate to say it, but a player that I was looking at 222, and I hated to see go at 220, Charlie Jones. When this pick got made, it was kind of like, bye-bye, Tyler Boyd. Thanks for your time at Cincinnati, but you're out of here next year. Just a route technician and makes a ton of sense in the slot there. They'll probably let him develop and be wide receiver 4 this year. But then I think they've gotten out of Boyd's contract, and Jones is going to slot right in there as the future 3 in an offense linked to Joe Burrow.
And, I mean, who knows with Higgins, right?
I mean, they've said basically the teams who have inquired, piss off, he's ours. But this is going to be the tough part is you've got Burrow that you're going to have to pay. You've got these 2 receivers you're going to have to pay. Mixon, you'll probably have off your books after this year, but you're going to have 4 or 5 guys get real expensive in a hurry here in the next 3 years. So they may have to make some decisions, but the position they've seemed to be taking so far is that decision's not going to come at the cost of T. Higgins.
Yeah. And, just thinking like macro NFL too, from their standpoint, like they invested their first 3 picks in the draft in defense. They addressed, I feel like they're preparing basically to like have cheap contracts on defense so that they can put all their money into their big 3 here on offense.
Seahawks come back taking Tucker Kraft from Green Bay. Then I finally make a pick on the clock, taking Darius Davis, wide receiver from Chargers. Kraft, I think again, good physical specimen pre-draft, but get stacked up with Luke Musgrave. So there's a question of, is this a Gronk Hernandez situation? Is this a Hayden Hurst Andrew situation? What's really going on here, and what's Kraft's opportunity going to be? But specimen wise, he was a great pick. And then Davis I liked just because the Chargers lost Carter. Darius Davis just screams kick returner, and that role was very productive for those who had him over the last couple of years for the Chargers. So seeing an opportunity to just get kind of a low a decent floor wide receiver 3 type player with some upside if he makes it into the offense.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
All right, I think we've hit the point in the draft where I'm going to start grouping a couple of these picks together, and then we'll react to them in a group. So before I do that, I'll go ahead and talk about some of the trades that have happened. Let's see. I gave up Cam Taylor-Britt for Benjamin St-Juste in a 4th. Not a big deal. Again, we're talking corner trade here. Titans give up Ty Chandler 328 and 515 for 401, 441, 527, and the Chargers 4th next year. Again, not a whole lot to discuss there. And then next trade impacts the 229. So we'll go up to that point in terms of a run through. So 223, we see one of the best first safeties come off the board, Brian Branch, going to our Chargers, but real life Detroit. Bills taking Eric Gray, needing some running back depth, and again, him potentially in the rotation if Saquon leaves, trade gets hold out. I mean, we've really reached the reach area of the running back tier. Lions taking Zach Evans, a bit of a Debbie Darling who never really panned out. We see a couple of those every year. Raiders taking Michael Wilson. I think people liked a lot better with the potential of Hopkins getting moved. Still a good prospect, but a little bit more blocked now. And the Steelers double tapping, going Zach Harrison, Atlanta at the end, and Kayshon Boutte, Patriots wide receiver. Again, Debbie Darling that fell out of favor and I think went in the 6th round of the NFL draft. So of that 223 to 228 run, anything that jumps out to you guys you want to talk about?
I was just surprised Zach Harrison fell as far as he did. He looked really good at Ohio State. He was just pretty consistent. He didn't always get all the sacks and all the biggest of plays, but I thought he had the chance to be a really good defense end in the league. To watch him fall over a lot more of these offensive dart throws was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Branch, I think that was too early. I think he probably could have been available later. I didn't love that. And Boutte, I don't know how to actually say it, but I'm very skeptical of New England wide receivers.
Michael Wilson really surprised me with how high he went in the actual draft. I know he was a late 3rd going to Arizona, but he did not look polished at all coming out of Stanford. He played a lot bigger than he was. I was really surprised at the combine when he came in at 6'2", because he really looks on his tape like he's 6'4", 6'5".
I'm intrigued by that pick and that landing spot. So like I see no issue with it, but it also, just like the Boutte, it could be a terrible pick. Like they could be, out of the league in 2 years.
All right. Talking through a couple trades here that impacted these next couple of picks. The Titans giving up 229 to the Giants, doing us all the service of finally getting KJ Hamler and Trayvon Moreg off of the Giants so he can stop offering him to everybody. Titans, you are a true hero of the draft, and we salute you. Before we get back to picks, though, a couple of other trades that happened here. Jags swapping receiver for running back, throwing Christian Watson and 414 to the Falcons for Josh Jacobs. And then Giants moving Uche and 312 to get Daxton Hill, 230, 424, and the 24 4th for the Bears from the Bears. So Giants from this emerges with 229 and 230. Moves off a couple of players that he wanted seconds for, and I think was offering to just about everybody in the 2nd round. But bearing the lead, Christian Watson, who I think everywhere is saying was one of the big winners from the draft. They got a lot of complimentary pieces, but no one to really challenge him as a wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. Getting that cheaply for Josh Jacobs, who was on a 1 year, big deal. I think it was a great snag by the Falcons.
Yeah, I love
this
the Watson pickup. I don't know. So Jacobs is like 14 million. I don't know what he'll be post extension, but I assume it's like maybe 18, 16, 18.
He's a Pro
he's
Bowler.
a Pro Bowler, so
Oh, yeah. So high end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that price discrepancy alone, let alone the fact that I like the young receiver better than the second contract seeking running back.
yeah, it felt very forced for me from the Jags. I don't feel like he needed to do it at all. Because his receiver room with Calvin Ridley, you got him coming back. Darius Slayton, for what he has been with his inconsistencies, they just added Hyatt. They get a healthy Kentucky boy, Robinson, back. Plus, it's Daniel Jones throwing the ball there. So he really hurt his receiving core, and he got a far more short-term asset with Jacobs. And I don't even think Jacobs has signed his tenure yet. So who knows what even happens with that.
Yeah, he hasn't. You're right. He did later get Hardman for Danico Autry, which I really liked.
Well, he also traded up last year, and I'm pretty sure gave up something substantial to go get Watson in the first place last year. So he invested heavily in just getting Watson, and then flipped him for just Jacobs. It just doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Right. Two more picks that we'll cover before, or two more trades we'll cover before we move back into picks. Panthers moving down off the 232 for 408, 413, and the Chargers 24 third. And then Broncos was wrongly awarded the Foster Moreau claim. So this was moving him over to Cowboys. I think that gets us to the beginning of the third round.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll move back to the draft. So again, Giants just acquired these picks and then goes and double taps offense. Tyler Scott to the Bears and Deuce Vaughn to the Cowboys. These are probably the right points for both these players. Scott looks like he's got a potential to really develop behind Mooney and take that role next year. And then Deuce Vaughn, great story from the draft, but also pretty good prospect. A little undersized, but spread it out and kind of use open space in the middle of the field with a Pollard or Deuce seems to make a lot of sense. Plus, with no more Zeke in town, there's a backup running back role that Deuce fits pretty well into. But Brandon, I'm sorry, I'm stealing your thunder.
No, don't worry about stealing my thunder. I like both these players. I've been trying to trade up a bit. I would have taken both of them over the couple prior like running backs or wide receivers that had gone. So I was happy that I was able to finally trade up and take them. I'm curious to hear James's thoughts on Deuce Vaughn's fit in Dallas, but I think opportunity I'm very excited about there to supplement my RB room and Tyler Scott. A lot of draft folks that I've listened to and read really liked Tyler Scott. So I was just like, I'm buying in. Fourth round draft pedigree for a speed wide receiver. Not too bad. So we'll see how he works out.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that Tyler Scott fell as far as he did. I'm not really thrilled about Justin Fields or anything there, but when you have a good run game, the thing that usually gets opened up the most is the deep shots, and Tyler Scott's instantly going to be like the fastest guy in Chicago in the receiving room.
Fields does have a arm.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a very great. Oh, KJ Hamler sucks. He's been in the league for 4 years almost now and has like 20 completed catches. Can't stay healthy. Let me get his replacement in Tyler Scott for free.
Yeah.
So that one was like, all right, guys.
Him with Daxton Hill. So.
Yeah, still, it's just one of those like, all right, that one's just whatever. And then Deuce Vaughn, yeah, he's a good story and everything, but he's like 5'5", barely $180. I don't really know what we're gonna do with him. I highly doubt he is really even an RB option. He'll probably be a special teamer and then probably slot or something. We might give him some gadget plays here and there, but I'm pretty sure Dallas is gonna go find a couple of RBs. to fill out the depth chart because Malik Davis isn't it either. It's essentially Pollard and no one right now.
Well, Kareem Hunt's still out there, so that could make a lot of sense. Let's see. Jags taking Brenton Strange, backup tight end for Jacksonville. I'm all for taking Penn State tight ends. That usually turns out to be a pretty athletic move. And he's backing up the Penn State tight end, but I don't know if this was that guy here, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think the tight end tier that I'm interested in at this round of the draft ended with Darnell Washington. So
I
this was
actually
the
really liked
target.
Strange. I wanted him actually. He was gonna be my 2-3-2 when he went. That was part of my. I'm like, all right, there's no one left in my range. I'm done. Big reason there is just Evan Ingram cannot run block. Never has been able to. The rest of the depth on that tight end room isn't very athletic and isn't very good at blocking either. So Strange is easily going to find himself 40, 50, 60% of snaps most games next year doing something. I might start a little bit less than that because they're going to have 3 wide receivers again, but he'll find plenty of opportunities, and especially if something doesn't happen with Evan Ingram on a more long-term basis.
Yeah, and I think he was franchised, but he didn't sign a new contract, right?
No,
He
he's just
Yeah, so that could be a good value. And I think Doug Peterson, he appreciates versatile tight ends from his time in Philly. Usually it's not just one-trick ponies like Evan Ingram is, despite what this year might tell you.
All right. Next 3 picks. So again, Panthers moved off the 232 to the Seahawks. He moves in and gets Dorian Williams. Lions take Dwayne McBride out of Minnesota, and then the Jets take DeMarvion Overshawn. I really like all 3 of these picks. For some reason, even post-draft, there's a lot of clamor out of Minnesota that Cook has done there. So if that happens, McBride gets an immediate opportunity. And for taking a guy, the Bengals had to take Brown at 203 for that role, and the Lions get a comparable player situation at 301. And then Williams and Overshawn were 2 of the linebackers I had in that same tier as let me scroll up here, Dayon Hanley. But they got each of those players here go half a round later. So I like the value a lot better in this range for those players. So I like all 3 of these picks.
Yeah, I concur. I really like McBride going into the draft, but his draft stock raised questions.
I think a lot of that had to do with just the abundance of running back talent in this class. Like, there's even some guys who went undrafted who are pretty talented that in a lot of years probably would have been 4th, 5th round picks.
Mm-hmm.
Just when there's an overage of it and you don't necessarily have the need, or there's just other positions that are more valuable, that are more scarce, it's easy for a lot of these guys to fall. Dorian Williams is interesting because Brandon Beane already came out and said essentially at the draft press conference that he was going to start at outside linebacker in camp. So people were kind of instantly speculating, oh, that's their new Mike. That's the guy to replace Edmonds. But that sounds like that's still going to be a mystery until we get to the preseason a little bit more. And then Overshow, it sounds like Dallas wants him to put on some weight. And depending on how heavy of usage Parsons actually gets at end, there's a chance that he could see some serious snaps at linebacker this year to where he could actually be a pretty productive rookie.
Yeah, I mean, the other aspect is, both Jabril Cox and I'm blanking on the other player. I really liked him last year. I think he's on our Lions. But there's 2
you're talking about Clark.
yeah, Damon Clark are in contention for
so-
2 of those linebacker roles.
Yeah.
And I think Overshown steps right into those competitions as well. All right. Stetson Bennett. Anyone want to talk about him here? Like, dislike?
I think it's fun. I'm glad he went somewhere interesting. Like the Rams are at least interesting because
Yeah,
it's Stafford. Missed a good chunk of last year. He's an older guy, has an ongoing shoulder issue, has had other kind of issues. I wanted to see him land somewhere where he would at least be something to potentially think about. And getting a quarterback at 303 when you have abundance of picks, why not? If you actually hit on that'd be massive. That's a lot safer of a bet than Blake Willis was last year.
Yep.
yeah, I like the value. I think this is around the time where it is a lot of dart throws and like quarterback. It could be the most valuable one if it hits. We'll see. I mean, I think everyone thinks their plan is to tank this year, so we might assume they would try and draft a quarterback next year, but that might not be possible based on the talent on that roster. You have
Do they
to
have their
be a
picks
rookie
in
quarterback and
24?
throw into a receiver. They do, yeah.
Okay.
Cooper Kupp's a pretty good target.
Not bad. All right. Before we get to these couple of picks here, we'll talk about 2 trades that impact them. Seahawks giving up 306 for Philip Dorsett, 316, 402. So basically a small fallback, and also picking up the contract of Dorsett. For the Raiders, again, $1.8 million. I think this is probably a little bit of a cap dump, but worked for the Browns to get to 306, and then recouping some value after just trading for the pick, moving back a slot from 306 to 307 and picking up 430 in the process. We'll come back and do the Bills trades a little bit later. But talking at 304, we've got DJ Johnson going to our Saints, a D end for Carolina. I think I like the pick a lot. Talk about him in a little bit more detail in a second here. Seahawks taking Brian Brees, D tackle for New Orleans. Cowboys grabbing A.T. Perry, reason to move up. And Browns taking Byron Young, D end for the Rams. Last piece I'll talk about there before I go back to trades is Yaya Diaby to the Packers, who I am partially convinced that Jeremy took just for the name.
I really like
Yeah,
Diaby. I was trying to trade back in here as well for him, so I really like the Diaby pick. A.T. Perry was a receiver I liked, but also fell in the real draft. But that could be a good kind of home run swing for the Cowboys. Did you end on Mozzie Smith? Did I miss that?
I did not talk
Okay.
about
Yeah.
But yeah, we can talk Mozzie. Mozzie going to the Jets, D tackle. I think a first round D tackle in the real draft for Dallas. They seem really high on him.
Yeah, he's very athletic. I think he was on the freaks list as a D tackle, so that's pretty good athlete. We'll see. I mean, Dallas rotates their D line a lot, but I mean, I expect him to at least be in on first and second down.
He's a hog molly. He had the best butt in the entire draft, man. He really did. He's thickum. He's essentially a Dalvin Tomlinson replacement, a young Dalvin Tomlinson. He's just very good at not giving up an inch of ground. He's not a Vita Vea to where he's going to take on double teams every play. He's not the sexiest of picks. He's just a big need that Dallas has had for a long time. So,
yeah, Dallas. I feel like you guys always draft well. Very annoying. There was a trade as well, 306. It was traded twice actually.
I talked about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Did I just blank on that? All right.
Yes,
My
you
bad.
did.
yeah.
Right, I missed enough things in here that's worth double checking me.
But yeah, no, some of these picks right here, I feel there's just a lot of value. DJ Johnson's great to Carolina because them going to a 3-4 makes Gross Matos kind of the odd man out, and DJ Johnson has he's had a lot more experience in it than Gross Matos has, so I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up taking over that starting role fairly early on, opposite of Brian Burns, or in some kind of role, a significant role there. Then people pronounce it completely different, but Brees, whatever. He just had a very rocky collegiate career after being the number one recruit. Yeah. So by rocky, I don't mean like he played bad or anything. I mean like his junior year, his sister died, and you have all that going on. And then his sophomore year, there's something else tragic that happened. So he's kind of all over the place. And then Byron Young is good, but he's one of the oldest players in the class, to where it's like I don't think he's really going to develop too much, but he's a player that should have impact because he's going to the Rams, who really need any kind of edge rushing help they can get. So it's good for a team that's trying to win now to have a player like that.
All right, so we'll jump back over to the trades here. Bill's coming in and making his annual. He usually makes 2 or 3 chunks of trades at the same time. They usually happen pretty close to each other, so makes a decent sized one and a big one.
Did we lose you? Y'all still there?
Yeah,
We lost Mike.
Gotcha.
That's it.
Mike's dead.
He'll be back soon enough.
Naheem Hines type replacement in Indy. Bears taking Isaiah McGuire in Cleveland, and the Bills taking Jordan Battle at safety. So Bills make these moves, grab 2 safeties and some depth on offense and at linebacker. And then we see Evan Hall and Isaiah McGuire go as well.
Mike, you cut out there while you were reading out the trades.
Huh. Can you guys hear me now?
We do hear you now.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, the trades, the 2 trades that were covered were Commander's second next year for $313, and then Bills giving McCaffrey to me for AJ Dillon, Jerry Jeudy, and Isaiah Simmons.
Yep.
So between the trades and through 313, then I'll do 314 as well because it makes some sense. Niners taking another 49er, as he's wont to do, Jair Brown at 314. So a couple safeties go, a couple big trades. Discuss.
Well, let's talk about the big trade. So yeah, McCaffrey for AJ Dillon, Jerry Jeudy, and Simmons. I think the sum of the 3 parts will likely exceed McCaffrey, but I mean, I'm pretty high on Jeudy, and I've been on record for that. But I really like the McCaffrey acquisition on your end.
I agree with that. I think the accumulation of points will probably be in favor of Bills, but I think if I'm involved in this trade, I want the McCaffrey side more than I want the Jeudy, Simmons, and Dillon side.
I was just glad to see Bills do something because his team was starting to look like he wasn't going to be very competitive this year, and then he kind of turned it around pretty quickly with the big deal.
Yeah, I think we all like the McCaffrey side, but like needs wise, I mean, he added 3, pretty good assets at 3 premium positions, so I thought that was a logical move. I was surprised how quickly it happened because he put that trade bait up, and like it was like an hour or 2 later that this trade went down. I wonder if he could have tried to milk it a bit more and see if he could have found something that he liked even more. But and then in terms of like 3 safeties going in the draft, this is around the time that safeties do typically go. So makes sense that the next couple guys with pretty decent opportunity in Philly, Cincinnati, San Francisco, like all of those teams have lost safeties or have aging safeties in the 49ers case. So yeah, makes sense.
All right, so let's jump back into some trades here, and then we will get back into the picks. We'll talk about who gets taken with this pick here in a second, but the Seahawks moving out again, capital in next year. Patriots giving the Commanders third and the Chiefs third next year for $316 this year. Panthers, again, the Chiefs this time doing us the credit, taking Austin Johnson, so Panthers can stop offering him to everybody with 333, so the Panthers can move up to 319. Then immediately gets right back into the range, moving Luke Musgrave to me for Dalton Schultz and 320. Jags swapping Denico Autry for McCole Hardman, potentially replacing some of the wide receiver production he just lost, and then also moving down from 322 to 402 and 411. Last but not least, Browns moving out from 325 to pick up the Jets third next year. So a couple of trades to unpack there, but what that turned into in draft pick or actual players, 315 Raiders taking Xavier Hutchinson, Patriots taking 316 in that deal and turning into Devin Witherspoon. So moving 2/3 to take the first corner in the draft. Dolphins taking Antonio Johnson. Chargers taking Justin Shorter. Panthers with their move up to take Keanu Benton, which, again, I think a lot of folks were trying to do. Chiefs moving out of his first-round tight end to get Dalton Schultz and Elijah Higgins. Lions grabbing Puka Nacua. And the Seahawks taking Sean Tucker, running back for Tampa. We'll pause there and keep going with a couple more picks in a second here. But that's a lot of transactions. I think a lot of folks are going to have some opinions on trading 2/3 to move up to get the first corner in the draft. Maybe people's opinions have changed now that the start requirements may have changed a little bit. But I think the big one here is Keanu Benton. Very solid D tackle. At some point, you expect that Hayward will retire, and Benton could see a big uptick in production at that point. So again, I think a real good solid pick there. Otherwise, I think a lot of these are cross your fingers and hope for the best.
I like the Puka pick.
I like the Puka pick too. Sean Tucker, I think, is the first undrafted free agent that got drafted.
Yeah, he is.
For what that's worth. Just when he went through all those trades, I mean, it's just wild the different values of picks in the mid part of the third round here, like future second, 2/3, all the way to like 2/4. It's pretty interesting kind of variance between a couple of picks here.
It's very crazy to me. Like, you have Sidney Brown at 310, and then you look at, what's available. Like 10 picks later, we have an Elijah Higgins and a Puka going, and a Sean Tucker. It's like, okay, there's a big drop off.
Yeah.
But Pats are gonna Pats, like he always does. And then I really liked Puka. He was the guy I considered several times throughout the thing, but just the injuries and his inability to stay healthy and on the field in college.
I picked right after this group, and I can tell you I wouldn't have taken Puka had he been on the board with my pick. But I do like him as a player and his opportunities.
What about
potential opportunity?
What about an undrafted player?
That's terrible.
Man,
Bad
Sean
decision.
Tucker was a dude at Syracuse. Like, it's surprising to me he went undrafted.
Me
And he
too.
went to the best RB coach in the league, and Skip Pete. So, who knows what will happen in Tampa with that? But
Yeah,
being
I mean,
undrafted is very scary. But also, if you do hit at this point, on a running back, it's massive.
Yep.
he was an early darling of the draft class, and then medicals came out. Obviously, they were quote unquote cleared, but not clear enough for a team to take him in any of the 7 rounds. So dubious in terms of how cleared he was in those medical reports that teams had on him. So hope for the best. The talent seems to be there, but if the medicals are bad enough that nobody's taking a shot on him until the UDFA round, that kind of says something too.
Javion
Which also
Hawkins a few years ago, right? The Atlanta running
It also
back.
just
That was
makes you surprised with Tajay Spears too, because his medicals came out and they sounded pretty awful, but he still got drafted by the Titans than here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep. All right. We talked through a couple of these trades, so we'll get up to about the 329 on this next run here. As mentioned, Eagles is making his first pick of the draft here, taking Trey Palmer, former darling from LSU, transferred to Nebraska. Still didn't necessarily see what he wanted to see, but again, the talent is there. Lions taking Henry Tutu. Beyond having a fantastic name, is going to have an opportunity to earn some snaps in that Houston defense. Broncos double tapping with Marte Mapu and Gervon Dexter. 2 more defensive pieces there for Broncos. And I covered the 325 trade beforehand, so that's why I'm going through it. Just the picks here. 327, Jags taking Jartavis Martin, Washington safety, and then Browns taking Nick Herbig. I'll come back to him in a second, but then Texans finishing up this run for us, taking Byron Young. So we'll pause and come back to the Panthers here in a second. But I think, again, we've seen a couple of these D tackles fall in our draft based off of compared to what their draft capital was in the real NFL draft. Byron's the most recent example of it. Big one for me was Nick Herbig. I kept seeing different opinions on what he was going to be. To me, he looked like he was going to be a pass rusher. So DN makes a lot of sense. But then I think if you look at ESPN or others' analysis of him, saying, "Oh yeah, this is a great off-ball linebacker," which is like that. What? That doesn't make sense with what position he played at Wisconsin or otherwise. So, can anyone translate Nick Herbig for me?
I would defer to James there.
he was used it all at Wisconsin. They used him at Mike. They used him at outside. They lined him up to rush. He doesn't really have a defined position yet. I feel they brought him in for depth everywhere. Because behind Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts, they don't have much for the middle. And then outside, you only have Wyatt and Highsmith, since they didn't bring back Dupree. Like, the only people left over is I think they got the Quincy, the Miami kid. They took like in the 5th, 6th round, or someone else didn't get cut. They just don't have a lot of depth at linebacker, and he's a guy that can fill multiple roles and is promising. So it'd be interesting to see where he sticks.
Yeah, with this group, I really like the Marte Mapu pick. I think he could be a Duggar replacement in a year. Pats are pretty notorious for moving on from guys, and Duggar's in a contract year.
Yep. And I like Gervon Dexter quite a bit too. There's only a few D tackles I thought in this class had really high pass rush upside, and Dexter was essentially my last guy.
And
other than that,
ripe for opportunity.
Yep. And I was really interested to see Jartavis Martin as being considered a safety. I don't know if he's going to play safety with the Commanders. So that'd be interesting to see.
All right. Let's move back to some trades here. Panthers had done a consolidation move, moving 403, 408, and 413 to grab 330 in the 401. Also freed up some space by moving off of T.R. Tart to the Eagles, $5 million contract that they get out of. Then moved. We got the Giants moving 424 and the Bears fourth next year to me for Khalil Shakir. And Panthers swapping the 401 he had acquired on Sunday for Corey Davis today. And then Eagles grabbing Lewis Sign for the Broncos' third-round pick next year. So that translates back to the draft of 330, which was acquired in one of these trades. Panthers continuing his onslaught of taking receivers who are probably a year away from inheriting really prime positions with Trey Tucker in Las Vegas. Texans taking Keaton Mitchell, who I liked a lot pre-draft if he landed in the right spot, and he probably did. So maybe a nice little steal there, depending on how things shake out in Baltimore. Browns grabbing Owen Popo, linebacker in Arizona, who, if I recall you guys mentioning, may be inheriting a nice, juicy spot there in that linebacking core. So we'll cover that in a second. Then Chiefs grabbing the next corner in the draft, Deontay Banks. Commanders grabbing Dylan Horton, and the Chargers grabbing Emmanuel Forbes, another corner. So we'll pause there between the picks and the trades. Who wants to talk about what?
I like Trey Tucker. Another, speed wide receiver. Will be interesting to see how he shakes out in Vegas. And the trades, I think pretty decent value on across the board. I know some people said it was like a cheap Khalil Shakir. We'll see. I'm just acquiring Buffalo Bills offensive players at this point, so I'm hopeful. But Corey Davis,
we all feel bad for your Steelers.
What's that?
We all feel bad for the Steelers. We all know he has Dalton Kincaid, and I can already see the 50 offers that have been sent.
There have been 0 offers sent to Kincaid as of this time. He can ensure that. But yeah, Corey Davis, like cap dump for 401, I think is like good value. Assuming he's going to get cut and signed somewhere else, it'll be a good opportunity. So it kind of makes sense. Lewis Cine went for a third, and he'll went for a third again. So.
Yeah, again, like I said, I really like the Trey Tucker pick. And then I think Keaton's potential good value. The corners are starting to go in a little bit more rapidity, but that's the right time for them to start going, especially with the potential bump in value. Again, just good solid picks to end the third. We are currently at the beginning of the fourth round. 401, which I recently acquired for Corey Davis, took, and I'm going to screw up the name, and I'm okay with that. Adetomiwa Abadaware, Northwestern DN, who went to the Colts. And then Jags grabbing Jake Haener, who is the Fresno State quarterback, who is now backing up the Fresno State quarterback in New Orleans. So may be inheriting a bit of a developmental role there behind Derek Carr, with some potential upside in the not too distant future. So with that, we're at the 403 with the Titans on the clock to close out the rest of the trades. Panthers and I made an illegal trade of Bradley Chubb for Bud Dupree in a third. I had traded Dupree to the Panthers, so that is being reversed. My apologies. Again, in this many trades, sometimes I miss one. I also took Brock Wright and DJ Reader, swapped him for Noah Brown, as mentioned, wanted a piece of the Houston wide receiver room, and that gave me a relatively cheap one. And then Broncos giving Houston's 5th next year for $515 this year. Continuing to find ways to kind of get into the back half of this draft and add a couple pieces of depth for Bill. So that's where we are today. That's an hour and 20 minutes of content. And yeah, we are trudging along into the 4th round. We really slowed down a little bit in the 3rd round. And again, part of that was weekend, part of that was holiday weekend. Part of that is I think we're getting to that part of the draft, and it happens every year where things are getting a little bit tight for teams in terms of roster, in terms of years, in terms of number of available spots on the roster, where people are going to start thinking about skipping picks. People are going to start thinking about trying to consolidate or move into next year, things like that. So it's not just because people are trying to shop and, quote, maximize value, but more some additional thought process comes in here, which is part of the roster management for this league. So, yep. So we will wait for the Titans to come back on and keep us moving along. But again, it's been fun so far. As I've said before, and will continue to say, please continue to have fun with it. It's one of the more fun events that happens, in my opinion, in our league year. It lasts a couple of weeks, and hopefully people are enjoying it while it's there. When you're on the clock, please, again, take the time to either shop the pick, make the pick, do what you want to do with the pick. But again, don't just sit there trying to milk it for a trade. If you're going to make the trade, make some effort for it, in my opinion. But again, everyone treats it a little bit differently. But frankly, just enjoy yourself. So until next time, we'll wrap things up. And I don't know, maybe get in some post-draft power ranks, depending on what really goes in the last round, 2 rounds of the draft at this point. I call it round and a half because we do usually see a large volume of skipped 5th round picks. But again, as mentioned, enjoy. And now to the fun part.